Okay, so here's the thing. A few weeks ago, a month or so ago, Howard, that runs Tight Lines Canadian Fishing Adventures on Facebook, and they got a website, he reached out to me and asked if I would write an article for their website and their socials and talking about spring fishing in Shield, Ontario, so northwestern Ontario, which I did. And it got me thinking I should do a video that kind of follows up with that. So that's what today's video will be about, guys. So when I thought about an article for his webpage and the Facebook and socials, I could talk about location. We've talked about them, in the past on this channel, and everybody in the industry's talked about locations for spring muskies. And on Shield Lakes, it's so hard because it all depends on the type of spring we get. If we have a warm spring or a late spring, if it's wet, if it's dry, if ice out didn't happen until like May 20th, then that affects the spawn. I'm going to do a video kind of previewing this season. Look for that next week, early next week before the opener of 2024 season. And I'll give you guys the best up-to-date information I can have at the time to kind of set anybody up that's coming up for the Northwestern Ontario opener. But for today, think of it as, to steal, a saying from Vavrock, kind of a tackle talk, but like it says right here, forget everything you know or you've been told about spring fishing, or in our case, it's not really spring up here when it's the third week in June. It's more like early summer, and sometimes it can be pure summer patterns. So let's dive into why we do things a little bit differently and why some of the old standards always apply. So we've only been filming for a few years, or filming and putting it out on YouTube. We've always did a little bit of filming, but we never really did much with it. But when I went and looked back on some of our photos and logs from, over the past 10 years, we kind of did adhere to the go small in the spring or opening week, or the first couple weeks, kind of keep it really small and simple. And small is a relative term in Northwestern Ontario because everything is generally bigger than you would think. But that being said, going back a few years, here's a couple pictures of an opening weekend. Dave, Kyla, and Dave got a huge silver pike, and I want to say that was on a spinnerbait. I don't remember exactly. My muskie came on a small crankbait. It was one of the headhunters from Livingston Lures when they first came out. Just ripping and twitching that over a gravel bar adjacent to an island. Dave's came off of a rock bar that come off of mainland. And Kyla's muskie here came on, I believe it was a little Musky Munchies triple slurp, one of the small ones. And this was our favorite size, and we caught an absolute shit ton of fish on these things. Like, it was criminal how many fish I caught on one of these. I think we had like 23 or 24 fish on one. But that's just a great size of lure for opening season, and you can use it all year round. But that's what Kyla's was caught on, I believe, and it was an open water reef. And there's a few other pictures kind of scattered through here of over the years of us using smaller baits, and I'll list the bait on the picture if I can remember, or if we have pictures of it. But we always use the small MEPS number 5 or the Blue Fox. And then when we were using PD's lures out of Ottawa, great baits, we helped them design a little double 6 blade called the Triple L. And it's a great little bait. We had some success with it. And somewhere along the way, we just stopped using small baits around opener. And I think in about 2018, 2019, we started to experiment with bigger baits. And again, big is relative to what you're throwing, around you in the boat. So in no particular order, I want to look back on the last couple of years and how we've changed things up from using what we would consider like a smaller size bucktail. So going back a few years, some of our first videos or first open water videos that we did for the channel, we're experimenting. We're trying to learn the cameras and learn being in the boat. Plus, you're fishing and it's open season, or it's right at the beginning of the season. So we're keeping it pretty simple. And one of the baits that we relied on a lot when we got kind of connected into the Dadson family, and it's one of the baits that we love, dual fluted 8. And this one has the top hook in it. But a lot of cases we like it with just the back hook. And you can burn this over weeds. You can burn it over shallow cover. It's perfect in the spring. It's a blade you can use all year round. So this fish here I caught on a fluted 8. And then that same day or weekend, Dave catches a fish that we are actually targeting open water. And it's not a spot that you would think a bucktail would be the ideal presentation. And Dave's throwing, it isn't this exact one, but it's very similar to a huge triple bladed Dadson, big profile, longer bait, and yet that fish comes up out of the deep off that first or second break line, which is where we like to try and target fish after, you know, the spawning and into opener, especially on these shield lakes. Look in your spawning base, but then come out and look for those first points. Again, everybody's talked about this stuff, but don't fish the point so much. Look for that first and second break out over the open water, into the basin, and look for suspended fish out there. And it's a pattern that we've put together over the past couple of years, a number of different ways. And these couple examples of bucktails are just one of them. And that's why we always seem to have a bucktail ready, or one of us is throwing a bucktail, because they just, when fish are feeding after the spawn and you get a bucktail moving fast anywhere close to them, they'll just grab it. And that's what you're trying to do in that post spawn is get those aggressive feeding fish. And that's why we like a bigger bucktail. So this isn't a blade with no name. I got some there. Again, that's kind of the size that we like to throw. Another bait that we've had just tremendous success with, and the dipstick needs no introduction. You guys that follow the channel, you've seen it everywhere. But I don't remember what year it was, 2022 possibly. This bait was just amazing for us straight out of the gate. Caught the first fish of the year. And going into 2023, I used an SRJ, very similar profile. You sent me does a little bit different stuff in the water, but again, it's ripping this stuff around the edges of weeds, kind of adjacent to spawning areas, fish that might be moving from spawning to open water or setting up in the weeds. So love that style of dive and rise. And guys, you just can't go wrong with a 9-inch Suick, a weighted Suick. This is one of the adjustable ones. That video is right here. And it just allows you to do a bunch of different things with a wooden Suick. You can add weight to the nose, you can add it to the belly, and super versatile. And it's a bait that a lot of people think of as more of a summer bait, but it's an absolute dead perfect spring bait. One style of bait that we've had luck with, and surprisingly I look back and there's not a lot of footage of it. It's not that we haven't caught on them, it just, for some reason, it hasn't either been us, it's been, you know, friends or clients or whatnot. But that hard-bodied bucktail, so like a Lee Lures Boilermaker, and this is a hot dog slapper from Big Guy Baits, and we picked one of them up, not this one, from Babe at the Minnesota Musky Show, and he kind of explained to us how he liked to run it. Rod tip in the water, just keep that bait just slightly under the water. And Dave got his very first fish of the year on that thing. And it was just, it's cool to talk to these guys, kind of like we've been doing in our bait videos here this spring, trying to talk to the builders and get their take on it. But that style of bait for us has worked really good. And then my daughter Kenzie got her first muskie on this Pugsley from Spanky. And it's just a great early season bait before the weeds are right to the surface. You can rip this over the top of weeds and you can actually slow roll this. There's really no wrong way to use it. So for inexperienced people, it's an amazing style of bait, and it's one that we probably should use more. And I know we tell ourselves that, but I'm hoping this year that we're going to be a little more conscious of it, and there's going to be some times where we're going to grab this as opposed to some other style of baits, because I think that they get overlooked a little bit. A few years back, I got my very first muskie of the season on a Lake X toad, and I got my very last casting muskie of the season on a Lake X toad. And there was a time in like 2017 or 2018 where the toad was literally welded onto my rod, and it was almost an unfair advantage up here. We had one of the, the earliest toads up in the area, and the fish hadn't seen them, but they're still amazing baits. And it's a little bit different than any of the other rubber baits, and that nose down hop always seems to trigger them. And it's just slightly different than any of those other baits. And it's not what you would think of as a conventional early season, spring opening weekend style of bait. But that up and down vertical motion just seems to drive those fish that are suspended off those first and second breaks crazy. And it'll draw fish from a long ways. It surprises me. You don't see anything on your graphs, your side imaging, and, if you have live, and yet fish will come 15, 20 feet from, out of the depths to pick up a toad. It's amazing how much success we've had on it. And it still amazes me to this day that not everybody's used one of these or has one of these. The other bait that a couple of years ago did really well on early was the twisted tube. And I don't know why earlier in the season, the twisted tube style, again, that obviously looks very similar profile. I know there's something about those, legs waving in the back that just seems earlier in the season to work really well. We've had really good luck late in the season too with these, but early in the season, I kind of lean more towards the twisted tube as opposed to like the 10-inch monster, which we've had great luck with. So that's another bait. And again, that's probably bigger than what most people, especially out of the Midwest, would think of as that early season presentation. And another one works all year. Mag shallow swimming dog. And the video from a few days ago right here where we talked about stuff like the Warhammer, I can see this one being very similar. It just big profile, moves a lot of water, a lot of tail action, and it's an easy meal for them to pick up. But we've had a lot of success with swimming dogs, and it's not just around rocks, it's around weeds. This one, I got some weights on it and the magnets on it as well to keep it, so the hooks stay tight to the body. This one obviously going to run deeper with the weight, so I'd probably run an unweighted one around shallow rocks or weeds. But if you're coming to Canada, you have to have a mag shallow swimming dog or something very similar to it. And another one that I'm excited to use this year is a quad dog. And somehow over the winter, the hype for the quad dog kind of died down. And I'm not sure why, because I really think that the guys that use these baits this year are going to put some fish in the net and it's going to get crazy. I think for us, if we can stick to it, I think this one will really be a standout bait for us. It's just a matter of sticking with it. Yeah, it's a little bit heavy to throw, a little bit heavy to rip, but if you commit to these big baits, what I like about this one, similar to the toad, is it's got that nose down vertical action on that hop, and I think that's really going to drive fish crazy. And I think I'll be adding more weight to this to try and get that nose down drop even exaggerated more. So I would say look out for the quad dog this year because I really think it's going to be a standout bait. One style of bait that doesn't get talked about a lot in Canada, Northwestern Ontario, is like the crane style twitch minnow baits. And this is from Big Guy Baits. And I don't think people think of these as springtime baits. And I know there's a lot of Americans come up and they swear by, this style of bait or the crane baits. And I think this size to me feels a little bit small, although we would throw this. And this is a Leo Lures. And I think this is another, smaller size one, but I think you could actually cast this, rip this around rock break lines and target those suspended fish. And David, a few years ago, had a tremendous amount of success on a triple D. And just an off-the-wall triple D. I picked up a couple this winter from TRO. These are both TRO custom colors. And I got my buddy Edward out of the States. I'll be unveiling what he did shortly. He tied me some dress trebles to run on the back of these. I definitely want to show you guys those because they look amazing, and he actually made them to match these two baits and a few others that I have. But guys, if you're coming to Canada, you have to have a triple D. Just grip, twitch, pause, crank, bang them off the rocks. They're good all year, but early season when, again, you're targeting those females that are sitting out over the suspended brake lines. And here's a 7-inch Ridgeway Custom that Matt sent me. And again, this is like perfect size. I wouldn't hesitate to throw the 9-inch or the 10-inch. It gets to be a little bit much for casting for a lot of people, but like the 7-inch should be, you know, right in the wheelhouse of the perfect size for spring. Again, bouncing them off rocks with that aluminum bill. We're hoping that that's going to be, you know, a very durable bait, maybe more durable than the triple D. But nice thing with triple D, you're not into them for a lot of money. So if you do break one, it's not the end of the world. These custom ones are definitely a little bit more. But like I've been saying, guys, these guys will take care of you if you have some problems with their baits. So when you're coming to Canada for opening week, or think of opener as from the opening day, third Saturday in June, right up to around July 1st, July 4th, that Canada Day, Independence Day period. And then from that early July, we start to go right into hard summer patterns. And summer peak up here is usually around the 20th of July. That's when you have your warmest water temps, your max weed growth. We haven't had any cold fronts come in. And that will linger on into August until we start to get our first cold fronts coming. That will change the water temp. But back to that opening 2-week period, you can come up here and throw small baits. And you notice I didn't mention glides. We just don't use a lot of glides. We are actually going to try and use glides this year in a deep application in summer and try and get glides down 10, 12, 15 feet, again, targeting those deep suspended fish. But for us, glides in the spring, they just don't produce for us. Yeah, we don't spend a ton of time on them. We don't really throw top water. We may start to incorporate stuff like that wake bait from Haymaker, stuff that we can move at a medium, speed, retrieve, something that can be kind of a niche application. But this stuff I showed you guys, this is like our bread and butter. This is what Dave and I throw. And for us, we have a lot of confidence in this stuff. And, a lot of guys, they look at a thing like a dipstick and they're like, well, that just doesn't feel like a spring bait. They look at a thing like a big twisted tube and it just doesn't feel like a spring bait. But when I wrote this article for Tight Lines, I started looking back and I was like, you know what? We are throwing a lot of bigger style lures. And in today's world, a 9-inch Suick is not big, but it's bigger than, a small 6-inch bait or a small bucktail or a small spinner bait. And for us, having confidence and knowledge that this stuff works and that we can rely on it, we know that if one of us in the boat is kind of picking from this, the other guy or two in the boat are free to experiment a bit. And that's the beauty of us living up here and getting to fish all the time here, is that we don't have to try and quickly put a pattern together because we only have 5 or 6 days. We can experiment, we can have fun, and if Dave's throwing a triple D at the front of the boat, I can, rip rubber at the back or vice versa. We're free to kind of experiment, and through the channel and with you guys watching us, we've kind of stumbled upon some of this stuff, and it's going to be an interesting year for us. We got a couple cool announcements we're going to do as we get into opening season, but this is where we're going to start with. And when I do our preview video, I'll touch on a couple of these things that we probably are going to highlight a bit more going into the season. But I really felt that this would give you guys an idea of, let's pick some bigger baits or baits that might be out of your comfort zone and go with an open mind And again, experiment. If you're not comfortable throwing, something like this, what I always tell everybody, give yourself about 20% of your day to try something new. And yeah, you don't want to maybe just try something new at the middle of the day off moon. Pick some good periods and have one person in the boat throwing that known producing bait. And if you're the second guy in the boat, try one of these baits out. Try something new. You'll be surprised. And all it takes is one or two catches, and you gain so much confidence in stuff like a tube, for example, or any of these other baits. And confidence in musky fishing, guys, is everything. And once you get it, you feel like a superhero on the water. And it's amazing when I see and fish with people that have that kind of confidence. It's infectious. And when you don't have it, it's just such a struggle. But check out the video right here where we talk about confidence in musky fishing. And hopefully you guys are going to have an amazing season. And for now, 54 Bus is out of here. We'll catch you guys out on the water later.